The sound was a low, constant hum, not the kind from machinery, but the murmured, somber drone of well-dressed people sharing platitudes. It wrapped around me, a thick, suffocating blanket. Each "I'm so sorry for your loss, and he was a great man" felt like a small, precise needle, piercing the numb bubble I was trying to exist in. I focused on the grain of the polished mahogany casket at the front of the room, trying to anchor myself to something, anything, to keep from screaming or crumbling. A hand, warm and firm, settled on the small of my back. Liam. His presence was immediate, a solid wall against the tide of sympathy threatening to sweep me away. Just a little while longer. Abi. He whispered, his lips close to my ear. His voice was a steady anchor. You're doing so well. I leaned into him, feeling the fine wool of his black suit under my fingers. I can't breathe. Liam, I really can't. I know. Sweetheart, I know. His arm tightened around me. Look at them all. He would have hated this. You know, all this fuss. A choked sound, something between a sob and a laugh, escaped me. He was right. My father, Benjamin Cartwright, a man who built a logistics empire from a single truck, had no patience for pageantry. This elaborate funeral, with its hothouse lilies and a string quartet playing mournful classical pieces, was entirely my stepmother's doing. Eleanor had always been big on appearances. Abigail. The voice was gruff, familiar. I turned to see my older brother, Devin, his face a mask of strained grief. His tie was slightly crooked. How are you holding up? I'm here, I said, which was the most honest answer I could muster. Devin's eyes flickered to Liam, and a shadow passed over his face. It was there and gone in an instant, but I caught it. There had never been any love lost between them. Devin thought Liam was a slick opportunist. Liam thought Devin was a resentful underachiever. Liam. Devin nodded. A curt, impersonal acknowledgement. Devin. Liam replied, his tone perfectly calibrated, respectful, yet cool. It's a tough day for everyone. Yeah, tough. Devin shoved his hands in his pockets. Just seems like a lot of people here didn't know him all that well. Just wanted to make sure they were seen paying respects to the great Ben Cartwright. His gaze swept the crowded funeral home chapel, lingering on a group of men in sharp, expensive suits, board members from my father's company, Cartwright Logistics. Devin. Not now. I pleaded, feeling a headache beginning to pulse behind my eyes. He's right, in a way. Liam said, smoothly, his hand still a steady pressure on my back. But it's a tribute to your father's influence. He touched a lot of lives. Touched. Or controlled. Devin muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. Before I could respond, my Aunt Martha descended upon us. She was my father's sister, a woman in her late 60s with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She pulled me into a hug that smelled of lavender and mothballs. Abigail, my dear child, she said, holding me at arm's length. Her eyes, the same shade of blue as my father's, searched my face. You look exhausted. Have you eaten anything today? I couldn't. Aunt Martha, you need to keep your strength up. She insisted, then turned her gaze to Liam. Liam, you're looking after her? It sounded like a question, but it felt like a command. Liam didn't flinch. He gave her the same sincere, capable smile that had charmed my father at their first meeting. Of course, Martha, every moment. Good. She patted my arm, but her eyes were still on Liam, sharp and assessing. It's a terrible thing. A heart attack. So sudden. Ben was so vibrant at the company retreat just last month. She shook her head. It just goes to show. You never know. We never know. Liam agreed, his expression somber. It's a tragedy. The doctors said it was probably stress-related. He was working too hard. Even after we tried to get him to slow down. The words were right. The tone was perfect. But something in the way he said it, a little too rehearsed, made a sliver of ice slide down my spine. Or maybe I was just looking for a reason to assign blame, for a target for the anger that was starting to boil beneath the grief. The service began. The minister spoke. Someone from the company gave a eulogy, full of corporate buzzwords that my father would have mocked. I heard none of it. I was back in his study 2 weeks ago. The smell of old books and cigar smoke. He was behind his massive oak desk, his face pale. Abi, you have to promise me you'll be smart, he'd said, his voice uncharacteristically urgent. About the company, about everything. Daddy, what are you talking about? You're not making sense. Just promise me. He'd insisted, gripping my hand. Things aren't always what they seem. I've made some decisions. To protect you. I'd chalked it up to paranoia. He'd been having stomach issues, feeling unwell. The doctor said it was an ulcer, exacerbated by stress. Now, the memory felt like a prophecy I'd been too blind to see. A wave of dizziness hit me. The room tilted. The hum of voices grew louder, merging into a single, roaring sound in my ears. The dark wood of the casket seemed to swell and recede. Liam, I gasped, my fingers clutching at his arm. I felt his grip tighten. That's it. We're leaving this line. Now, he expertly guided me away from the receiving line, his body shielding me from the concerned stares. You're white as a sheet. Abi, you need air. You need to sit down. I just need a moment. You need more than a moment. He led me through a side door, out of the main chapel and into the hallway that led to the funeral home's private sitting rooms. Wait here. Don't move. He left me leaning against the wall and returned a moment later, holding a tall glass of orange juice. The vibrant color looked obscenely cheerful in the muted taupe hallway. Here, drink this. The sugar will help. I shook my head, my stomach churning. I can't. Abigail, please. His voice was gentle but firm. It was the voice he used when he was managing a crisis at the office. The voice that got things done. For me, you're in shock. You need to keep your strength up. Just a few sips. Reluctantly, I took the glass. The cold felt good against my palm. I brought it to my lips and pretended to take a sip. The sweet, cloying smell made me feel sick. There's a garden out back, Liam said, his hand returning to my back, guiding me again. Quiet. No one will bother you there. Just go sit, breathe, drink the juice. I'll handle things inside. Tell everyone you're indisposed. He pushed open a heavy oak door, and the damp, cool air of the afternoon hit my face. It was a relief. He led me to a stone bench nestled between two bare-limbed cherry trees. Sit. I'll be back to check on you soon. I just need to make a quick call. There's an issue at the office that can't wait. Damn timing. He kissed my forehead, his lips dry and warm. Drink the juice. Abi, please. I nodded, unable to speak. He gave me one last, worried look, then turned and walked back inside, pulling his phone from his pocket. I heard the low murmur of his voice as the door swung shut. Yes, I'm handling it. The projections need to be on my desk by... Silence descended, broken only by the distant sound of traffic and the chirping of a lone, stubborn bird. I looked down at the glass in my hand. The orange liquid shimmered, innocent and deadly. Deadly, where had that thought come from? Grief was making me hysterical. Liam was my husband. He'd been a rock through all of this. He'd been the one dealing with the funeral directors, the lawyers, the board members. While I fell apart, I set the glass down on the bench beside me, my hand trembling. I dropped my face into my hands, the pressure building behind my eyes into a full-blown storm of tears. This was it, the rest of my life without my father, the man who had taught me to ride a bike, to read a balance sheet, to be tough but fair. Gone, because of a heart attack, a sudden, massive, fatal heart attack. The rustle came from the large rhododendron bush to my left. I froze, wiping my tears away hastily, thinking a reporter or some morbidly curious guest had found me. A small face peered out from between the glossy green leaves. A boy, no more than 7 or 8, with wide, serious eyes and grass stains on his knees. He was looking not at me, but at the glass of juice. "Hey," I said, my voice thick. He didn't run. He took a tentative step out. "It's okay," I said. "Are you lost?" He shook his head, his eyes still fixed on the glass. He pointed a small, grubby finger at it. "That man," he said, his voice clear and high. "The one who was just here. Your husband." "Yes, Liam?" "He put candy in your drink." The world didn't stop. It didn't slow down. It just tilted on a different axis. The words were so simple, so absurd. They hung in the cool air between us. "What?" I saw him. The boy insisted, emboldened by my confusion, when nobody was looking. He took something from his pocket, little white candies. He put them in your cup, really fast. A coldness, far deeper than the February air, seeped into my bones. Little white candies. My father, these last few weeks. The nausea, the dizziness. The doctor, so sure it was an ulcer. Stress-related. "You must be mistaken." "Honey," I managed to say, my throat tight. Maybe he was just stirring it. The boy, Jake, I remembered now. He was the son of the groundskeeper. Shook his head with the absolute certainty of a child. "No." He dropped them in. They went plink, plink, like when my mom put sweetener in her coffee. But they were candies. Plink, plink. The garden door creaked open. Liam stood there, phone in hand, his face a mask of concern. "Abby, how are you feeling?" "Sweetheart, you haven't touched your juice." His eyes went from my tear-streaked face to the full glass on the bench, and then to the little boy standing beside me. For a fraction of a second, a flicker of something, surprise, irritation, crossed his features. It was gone so fast, I almost convinced myself I'd imagined it. "Jake, right?" Liam said, his voice friendly. "Your mom is looking for you. You shouldn't bother Mrs. Harrington. She's very sad today." Jake looked from Liam to me, his earlier confidence vanishing. He mumbled a quick sorry and darted back into the bushes, disappearing as quickly as he'd come. Liam walked over and sat beside me, picking up the glass. He held it out to me. "Please, Abby, just a little. For me. I can't bear to see you like this. You need to keep your strength up." He was so close. I could smell his cologne, the same one my father had given him for Christmas. I looked into his eyes, the eyes I'd fallen in love with 3 years ago. They were full of nothing but worry and love. And all I could hear was a little boy's voice, ringing in my ears. "He put candy in your drink." Liam's presence beside me on the stone bench felt different now. The solid comfort I had leaned on moments before had transformed into something oppressive, a weight threatening to pin me in place. The cold seeped up through the stone, but it was nothing compared to the ice forming in my veins. "Abby, you're shaking," he said, his voice laced with that practiced concern. He tried to put his arm around me, but I flinched, an involuntary spasm I disguised as a shudder. "I'm just so cold," I stammered, wrapping my arms around myself. My mind was racing, a frantic hamster on a wheel. Jake, the candies, plink, plink. It was insane, a child's fantasy. Liam loved me. He'd been a rock. But my father's words echoed, clashing with the child's. "Things aren't always what they seem. Here, this will help." Liam insisted, pressing the cool glass into my hands. His fingers brushed against mine, and I had to fight the urge to recoil. The orange juice looked viscous now, sinister. "Drink it. The sugar will warm you up." My throat was sealed shut with panic. I couldn't, not a drop. Every instinct screamed at me, but I couldn't let him know. If this was all a grotesque misunderstanding, my suspicion would shatter us. But if it wasn't, letting him know I was suspicious would be far more dangerous. I needed a distraction, an excuse. "Liam, what was the call about?" I asked, my voice too high, too tight. "The office? On a day like this?" I held the glass in my lap, making no move to drink. He sighed. a weary, put-upon sound. It's nothing for you to worry about. Just a crisis with the West Coast logistics chain. Devon's mess. Frankly, I told your father not to put him in charge of that merger. Now I'm left to clean it up. He shook his head, his gaze drifting toward the house. But it can wait. Your health is all that matters right now. Please, Abi, drink. He was steering the conversation back to the juice. Always back to the juice. His eyes kept flicking to the glass in my hands. Is it Devon? I pressed, clinging to the topic like a lifeline. Is he okay? He looked terrible inside. Liam's lips tightened almost imperceptibly. Devon is fine. He's upset. We all are. But this isn't about him. This is about you. His tone was gentle, but there was an edge of impatience underneath it. I need to know you're okay. I can't focus on anything else. So, please, just take a sip. For my peace of mind. He was boxing me in, using my love for him, my usual desire to ease his burdens, as a weapon. The manipulation was so subtle, so expertly woven into the fabric of care, that I might have missed it a day ago, an hour ago. Now, it was all I could see. Just take a sip. For my peace of mind. The door to the garden opened again, and salvation walked out in the form of my Aunt Martha. Her sharp eyes took in the scene in a nanosecond. Me, rigid and pale, clutching the full glass like a shield. Liam leaning in a little too close, his posture tense. There you are, she announced, her voice cutting through the tension. Liam, they need you inside. The funeral director has some questions about the procession to the cemetery. Apparently, the paperwork isn't quite in order. Liam's jaw tightened. Can it wait? Abigail isn't feeling well. It can't, Martha said, her tone brooking no argument. It's a legal matter. Requires the next of kin signature. That's you. At the moment, isn't it? She didn't wait for an answer. I'll sit with Abigail. Go on. The look Liam gave her was a complex cocktail of frustration and forced acquiescence. He stood up, smoothing his suit jacket. Of course, Abi. I'll be right back. You'll be okay with Martha? I'll be fine, I whispered, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. He nodded, gave Aunt Martha a tight smile, and disappeared back inside. The moment the door clicked shut, the air felt lighter, but the panic surged back, raw and unchecked. The child, I gasped, turning to Martha. Jake, the groundskeeper's boy. Where is he? Martha didn't ask questions. She simply assessed my face. The sheer terror I knew was visible in my eyes. I saw him run around the side of the greenhouse. What's this about? Abigail? I need to find him. Now. I stood up, my legs wobbling. I thrust the glass of juice at her. Don't just hold that. Don't spill it. I didn't wait for a response. I gathered the black silk of my funeral dress and hurried across the damp lawn toward the large Victorian greenhouse that stood at the far end of the garden. Jake? I called out, trying to keep my voice low but urgent. Jake, it's Mrs. Harrington. I need to talk to you. There was a rustle from behind a wheelbarrow filled with potting soil. The boy peered out, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and curiosity. I'm sorry, he mumbled. I didn't mean to get in trouble. You're not in trouble, I said, kneeling before him, ignoring the damp earth soaking into the knees of my stockings. I grabbed his small shoulders. Jake, listen to me. This is very, very important. What you told me about the candies, are you absolutely sure? He nodded vigorously. Yes, ma'am. I was hiding in the bushes by the patio door. I saw him. He stood by the table with the drinks, and he looked around, and then he took a little packet from his pocket, like the kind my mom has for artificial sweetener. He ripped it open and poured it into the orange juice. Then he stirred it with his finger. A packet, not loose candies. He stirred it with his finger. The detail was too specific, too bizarre for a child to invent. Did you see what color the packet was? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. White. he said without hesitation. All white. My vision swam. I took a deep, ragged breath. Jake, I need you to do something for me. Can you be a superhero? A secret agent? His eyes widened with intrigue. He nodded. I need you to not tell anyone what you saw. Not your mom. Not your dad. Not anyone. Especially not Mr. Liam. It's our secret. Can you do that? Is he a bad guy? Jake whispered, his voice full of awe. I looked into his innocent face and made a decision. I couldn't lie to him. Not about this. I don't know. Jake, that's what I need to find out. And to do that, our secret is the most important thing in the world. Do you understand? He nodded again, solemnly. I can keep a secret. Good boy. Now, go find your mom and act normal. I stood up, my knees cracking, feeling 100 years old. I walked back to where Aunt Martha stood waiting, holding the full glass of juice as if it were a venomous snake. She had moved away from the bench and was standing on the flagstone path. Abigail, she said, her voice low and deadly serious. What in God's name is going on? The dam broke. The words tumbled out in a hushed, frantic torrent. Jake saw him. Liam. He put something in my juice. A powder from a white packet. Martha. He's been insisting I drink it. He won't let it go. Martha's face, usually a mask of genteel composure, went pale. Her eyes darted from the glass in her hand to the house and back to me. Ben. She breathed. His heart attack. So sudden. The nausea he'd been complaining about. We stared at each other, the unthinkable taking shape in the space between us. The pieces, once scattered, were snapping together with terrifying, logical precision. The company, the inheritance, Liam's rapid rise, my father's vague warnings. What do we do? I whispered, the weight of it crushing me. Martha's eyes, so like my father's, hardened. She was no longer just my aunt, she was a Cartwright. And Cartwrights fought back. First, she said, her voice crisp and clear, we do not panic. Second, we do not drink this. She turned and, with a swift, decisive motion, poured the orange juice onto the roots of the dormant rose bush beside us. The soil darkened, absorbing the liquid. And third, we give him exactly what he expects. What's that? A grieving, overwhelmed wife. She said, her gaze fixed on the garden door. You need to go back in there. You need to be pale and shaky. I'll tell Liam you tried to drink it, but were too upset that you spilled most of it. We need to buy time. Time for what? I asked, feeling utterly lost. To think, Martha said, linking her arm through mine. Her grip was surprisingly strong. To plan, and to find out what really happened to your father. She looked at me, her expression grim. Now, take a deep breath. Wipe your eyes. The performance of your life is about to begin. As we walked toward the door, I felt a new kind of fear, colder and more calculating than the initial panic. The grief was still there, a raw, gaping wound. But now, coiling around it, was something else. The terrifying need to survive. Aunt Martha's arm was a steel rod through mine, propelling me forward. The world had narrowed to the heavy oak door leading back into the funeral home. Every instinct screamed at me to run in the opposite direction, to flee the man waiting for me inside. But Martha was right. Flight was not an option. It would reveal everything. I had to face him. I had to lie better than I had ever lied in my life. Remember, Martha whispered, her voice low and urgent as we reached the door. You are devastated. You are fragile. The world is too much for you. You barely know what you're doing. Let the tears come if they will. They'll sell the story. I nodded, swallowing the hard lump of fear in my throat. I took a shaky breath, trying to summon the overwhelming grief I'd felt just 30 minutes ago. It wasn't difficult. The horror of Liam's potential betrayal was now layered on top of it, a toxic cocktail that made me genuinely nauseous. Martha pushed the door open, and the muffled, respectful hum of the mourners washed over us. The air inside was thick with the scent of lilies and perfume. It felt suffocating. Liam spotted us immediately. He was standing near the entrance to the main chapel, talking to one of the board members, but his eyes were scanning the room. For me, he excused himself with a curt nod and strode toward us, his expression a masterpiece of concern. "Abi," he said, reaching for my hands. His were warm and dry. Mine were like ice. "Martha said you weren't feeling well. I was about to come check on you." His eyes searched my face, then flicked down to my empty hands. "The juice?" She couldn't keep it down. "Liam," Martha interjected smoothly, her tone laced with a touch of maternal reproach. The poor thing. She took one sip and her stomach revolted. She spilled the rest all over herself and the bench. It was a dreadful scene. I've just managed to get her calmed down. I seized on the narrative, letting my shoulders slump and my lower lip tremble. I looked down at my dress as if searching for a stain that wasn't there. "I'm sorry, Liam," I mumbled, my voice thick. It was too sweet. It made me sick. "I'm such a mess." The lie fell from my lips, coated in a truth that made it believable. I was a mess. For a heartbeat, I saw it, a flash of something hard and impatient in Liam's eyes. It was gone in an instant, replaced by soothing sympathy. "Oh, sweetheart, don't you apologize. It's okay." He pulled me into an embrace. I forced myself to relax into him, to bury my face in his shoulder, though the smell of his cologne now made my skin crawl. "We'll get you some water, or some tea, something gentle. I just need to sit down." I whispered into his suit jacket, "Somewhere quiet." "Of course." He kept his arm around me, guiding me away from Martha. "Thank you, Martha, for staying with her. It's no trouble at all." "Liam," she said, her voice dripping with false warmth, "I'll let you two be. I should find Eleanor. The poor woman is beside herself." She gave me a barely perceptible nod before melting back into the crowd. My ally, my co-conspirator, Liam led me to a small, private sitting room reserved for the family. It was blessedly empty. He sat me down on a plush velvet settee and poured a glass of water from a crystal pitcher on a side table. "Here, small sips." I took the glass, my hand trembling so visibly the water shimmered. I wasn't acting anymore. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving raw, jagged terror in its wake. I took a tiny sip, the cool water a balm on my parched throat. Liam knelt in front of me, taking my free hand in his. "Abi, look at me." I forced my eyes to meet his. They were the same warm hazel I'd woken up to for the past 2 years. How could they be a lie? "I know this is unbearable, but we will get through this. Together. I promise you." The words were perfect. The delivery was flawless, and every syllable felt like a razor blade. "The doctor said," I began, my voice cracking. I needed to test him, to poke the bear and see if it would growl. "The doctor said Daddy's heart, it was so weak, so sudden, but he hadn't been feeling well. Had he? Those last few weeks. The nausea." Liam's expression softened further with a practiced grief of his own. "I know. I tried to get him to see a specialist, but you know how stubborn he was. He just blamed it on stress, on that new medication for his stomach." He shook his head, his thumb stroking the back of my hand. "If only I'd pushed harder. I should have made him go." He was giving himself an alibi, a reason for my father's symptoms that wasn't poison, a reason that also absolved him of any blame. "If only I'd pushed harder. It was a masterstroke. It's not your fault," I heard myself say, the good wife parroting the expected line. "It feels like it is," he said, his voice dropping to a pained whisper. He dropped his head, and the picture of anguished guilt was so convincing that for a terrifying second, I doubted everything. Jake's story, Martha's suspicion, my own gut feeling. What if I was having a psychotic break? What if grief was twisting my mind? Then he looked up, and his eyes were clear. "We need to focus on you now, Abi, on getting you strong. The reading of the will is tomorrow. There will be a lot to deal with. A lot of vultures. He nodded subtly toward the door, indicating the people milling outside. I'll be there to handle it all. But I need you to be strong. For me. Can you do that? The will dot, of course. It all came back to the will, to the company, to the money. I'll try, I whispered. That's my girl. He leaned forward and kissed my forehead. His lips felt like a brand. I have to go smooth a few more feathers. The procession to the cemetery will start soon. Will you be okay here for a few minutes? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He stood up, gave me one last, lingering look of concern, and left the room, closing the door quietly behind him. The moment the latch clicked, I sprang into action. The passive, grieving wife was gone. I was my father's daughter now. I set the water glass down with a sharp click and went to the door, pressing my ear against the cool wood. I heard his footsteps recede down the hall. I had to move. Martha's instruction to give him what he expects was only half the plan. The other half, the dangerous half, was mine to execute. I had to get back to that drinks table. Cracking the door open, I peered into the hallway. It was empty. The main crowd was still in the chapel or the larger parlors. I slipped out, moving quickly and quietly down the corridor, away from the main rooms, toward the rear of the building where the garden was. The patio door was just ahead. I could see the table, still laden with pitchers of water, iced tea, and the distinctive, bright orange juice. My heart hammered against my ribs. What if he was watching? What if this was a trap? I took a steadying breath and walked forward, trying to look like a bereaved daughter in need of a moment of quiet. I reached the table. My eyes scanned the pitchers. There were 2 pitchers of orange juice. One was nearly full. The other was about 3/4 empty. That was the one Liam had poured from. The one he'd laced with whatever was in that white packet. My mouth went dry. I glanced around. The patio was deserted. From inside, I could hear the muffled sounds of the gathering. I had seconds, maybe less. I picked up the nearly full pitcher of orange juice. Then, with a hand that trembled only slightly, I picked up the 3/4 full one. I carried them both to a large, ornate pot holding a fiddle-leaf fig tree in the corner of the patio. In one fluid motion, I poured the contents of the suspect pitcher into the potted soil. It drained away silently, quickly. I then poured the fresh, clean juice from the full pitcher into the now empty one, filling it to about the same level it had been before. It was done. The switch was made. I placed the now empty pitcher back on the table, my movements swift and sure. As I turned, pitcher in hand, I almost screamed. Devin was standing in the patio doorway, watching me. His arms were crossed, his expression unreadable. What the hell are you doing, Abby? He asked, his voice low and flat. My mind went blank. Panic, cold and absolute, seized me. How much had he seen? The juice, I stammered, clutching the clean pitcher to my chest like a shield. It had a fly in it. It was disgusting. I didn't want anyone else to drink it. It was a pathetic, transparent lie. Devin's eyes, so like my father's, bored into me. He didn't believe me for a second. He looked from my face to the pitcher, to the potted plant now glistening with moisture. He took a step toward me. I flinched back. A strange, grim understanding dawned on his face. It wasn't anger. It was something else. Something like solidarity. Liam, he said, the single word laden with a lifetime of contempt and suspicion. I just stared at him. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't confirm it. I couldn't trust him. The rivalry between him and Liam was legendary. This could be a trick. He seemed to read my hesitation. He shook his head, a bitter smile touching his lips. You're playing a dangerous game. Little sister. He glanced over his shoulder, back into the house. He's looking for you. The procession is lining up. He didn't wait for a response. He simply turned and walked away, leaving me standing there. my heart pounding, holding a pitcher of juice that was now, I hoped, just juice. I placed it back on the table, my mind reeling. Did Devon know? Or did he just suspect? Was he an enemy? Or an unexpected ally? There was no time to ponder it. I smoothed my dress, wiped my hands on my black silk, and walked back into the funeral home. The performance was far from over. In fact, the main act was yet to come. I had swapped the poison for a placebo. Now, I had to wait and see who would take the bait. And I had to pray to a God I wasn't sure was listening that it wouldn't be some innocent mourner looking for a refreshment. I found Liam near the front entrance. He took my arm, his grip firm. There you are. Ready? He asked, his voice gentle. No, I said, and it was the complete, unvarnished truth. But let's go. As we walked out into the gray afternoon to bury my father, I realized the real funeral was just beginning. I was now burying my marriage, my trust, and the woman I used to be. And I was walking arm in arm with the man who might very well have killed them all. The graveside service was a blur of gray sky, damp earth, and hollow words. I stood between Liam and Aunt Martha, a silent statue wrapped in black. I felt Liam's body beside mine, a constant, menacing source of heat. Every time he shifted, or squeezed my hand, or leaned in to murmur some condolence to a guest, a fresh wave of cold dread washed over me. My eyes kept scanning the small crowd gathered around my father's final resting place. I saw Devon standing slightly apart, his jaw clenched, his gaze fixed on Liam with an intensity that was no longer just rivalry. I saw Aunt Martha's profile, sharp and watchful, and I saw, near the back, the groundskeeper holding a fidgeting Jake's hand. The boy's eyes met mine for a second, and I gave him the smallest, most imperceptible shake of my head. Our secret. My mind wasn't on the prayer. It was on the pitcher of orange juice sitting on the patio table back at the funeral home. Had anyone drunk from it? Had a server cleared it away? Had Liam gone back for it? The uncertainty was a live wire in my chest. Finally, it was over. The first shovelful of dirt hit the casket with a sound that would haunt me forever. People began to drift away, back to their cars, back to the reception at the house. Let's go home, Abby, Liam said softly, his arm guiding me away from the grave. It's done. It's done. The words echoed ominously in my head. The reception at the Cartwright estate was a surreal affair. The grand living room was filled with the same people from the funeral home, but the atmosphere had shifted. The formal mourning was giving way to something looser, aided by the open bar and platters of canapes. Laughter, too loud and too sudden, would occasionally ring out, followed by hushed, guilty tones. Liam was in his element. He moved through the room like a statesman, accepting condolences, discussing business in low tones with board members, effortlessly managing the event. He brought me a glass of sparkling water with a twist of lime. No juice, he said with a small, understanding smile. This should be gentler. Thank you. I mumbled, taking it. Was he being considerate, or was he ensuring I didn't ingest anything he hadn't personally vetted now? The paranoia was a corrosive poison in itself. I found a quiet corner near the fireplace, trying to be invisible. Aunt Martha materialized beside me. Any sign? She murmured, pretending to adjust a vase of flowers. No, he's been drinking whiskey the whole time. I whispered back, watching Liam across the room, holding a tumbler of amber liquid. He hasn't gone near the patio. Good. She paused. Devon approached me. He's concerned. My head snapped toward her. What did he say? He said he saw you having a moment with the refreshments. He asked me if you were all right, if you needed protection. Martha's eyes were sharp. I told him you were grieving and not to read into things. But he's not a fool. Abigail. Before I could respond, Liam was upon us. He'd shed his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves. A picture of casual, capable control. But there was a faint sheen of sweat on his forehead. There you are, he said, his voice a little too hearty. Martha, would you excuse us? I need to steal my wife for a moment. Some of the overseas partners want to pay their respects. Of course, Martha said, melting away with a warning glance at me. Liam took my arm, his grip a bit tighter than necessary. Just a few minutes. Then you can disappear. I promise. As we walked, he loosened his tie with his free hand. God, it's warm in here. Is it warm to you? A little, I said, watching him. His color seemed off, a little flushed. We made the rounds. I shook hands, accepted hollow words. My smile a frozen rictus. Liam did most of the talking, but I noticed his sentences were beginning to trail off. He'd pause, as if searching for a word. And of course, the Singapore expansion was entirely Ben's vision, so we'll have to see how the board wants to. He stopped, blinking rapidly. He took a small sip from his whiskey glass, but his hand wavered slightly. Liam? I asked, feigning wifely concern. Are you all right? You look pale. He forced a smile. Just a long day. Stress. Maybe that shrimp puff wasn't sitting right. He rubbed his sternum absently. I think I need a glass of water. Excuse me. He walked toward the bar, his steps not quite as steady as they had been. I followed at a distance, my heart beginning to hammer a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Was this it? Was this the beginning? He bypassed the bar and headed instead for the patio doors. My breath hitched. The juice. I followed him outside. The evening air was cool, a relief from the stifling heat inside. Liam was standing by the refreshment table, pouring himself a large glass of water from a pitcher. He drank it down in several long gulps. Then, his eyes fell on the pitcher of orange juice, the one I had refilled. He stared at it for a long moment. A strange expression crossed his face, a flicker of confusion. Then calculation. He picked up the pitcher, hefting its weight, and poured a small amount of the orange liquid into a clean cup. He swirled it, sniffed it. He looked around, his gaze sweeping the empty patio, and for a terrifying second, it landed on me, standing in the doorway. His eyes widened. He set the cup down. Untouched, he walked back toward me, his movements deliberate but slightly uncoordinated, like a man fighting off a wave of dizziness. Abi, he said, his voice a little slurred. Did anyone bring you a drink out here earlier? After you spilled yours? I shook my head, my throat tight. No, just the water you gave me. I took a step toward him. Liam, you're scaring me. What's wrong? He was sweating profusely now. He grabbed my wrist, his fingers hot and clammy. The juice. On the table. You're sure you didn't drink any? You have to tell me the truth. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated. The fear in them wasn't for me. It was a personal, panicked terror. The horror in his stare was dawning. A slow, awful realization. I told you. It made me sick, I said, pulling my wrist back. I haven't touched it. Why? He didn't answer. A full-body shudder racked him. He stumbled, bracing himself against the doorframe. I don't feel right. He gasped. His breath was coming faster, shallower. Abi, something's not right. He looked from me to the house, back to me. The pieces were crashing together in his mind. His insistence that I drink the juice, my refusal, the spilled glass, the now full pitcher he'd left partly empty, the symptoms crawling through his own body. The horrified stare solidified, transforming from confusion into a bone-deep, paralyzing knowledge. He knew I hadn't drunk it, and he knew, with a certainty that mirrored my own, exactly what was happening to him. You, he choked out, the word thick with accusation and disbelief. What did you do? Me. I breathed, taking a step back, playing the innocent to the hilt even as my blood roared in my ears. Liam, you need to sit down. Let me call someone. No. The word was a panicked shout. He lunged forward, not at me, but past me, into the living room. People turned to look. The buzz of conversation died. Liam staggered into the center of the room. one hand clutching his throat, the other clawing at his chest. His face was a grotesque mask of sweat and panic. All eyes were on him. "Help," he rasped, his voice barely audible. Then his eyes found me again, standing frozen in the patio doorway. They locked onto mine. That horrifying stare, full of terror, pain, and the furious, screaming realization of betrayal was aimed directly at me. It was a silent accusation that echoed through the suddenly silent room. He took a staggering step in my direction, his arm outstretched, a finger pointing shakily. His mouth worked, but no sound came out. Then, his legs buckled. He crashed to the Persian rug. A heavy, sickening thud. For 1 second, there was absolute silence. Then, chaos erupted. Someone screamed. A glass shattered. Voices rose in a cacophony of shouts. "Call 911. Is he having a heart attack? Give him space." I stood rooted to the spot, watching as a circle formed around my husband's convulsing body. Aunt Martha was suddenly at my side, her fingers digging into my arm. "Abigail," she said, her voice a low, urgent command in the din. "Now, the boy. Find Jake and his mother. Now." Her words broke my paralysis. The performance was over. The real war had just begun. I turned and ran, not toward my fallen husband, but into the depths of the house, to secure the one witness who could prove I wasn't a murderer, and that Liam very likely was. The house was a tomb compared to the roaring chaos I'd left in the living room. The distant wail of sirens, growing louder, was the only sound that permeated the thick silence of the back hallways. My heels clicked a frantic, uneven rhythm on the polished hardwood as I ran toward the kitchen, the servants' quarters, anywhere the groundskeeper and his family might be. I found them in the large, homey kitchen. Mrs. Henderson, the cook, was wringing her hands, while her husband, Gary the groundskeeper, stood grim-faced, listening to the commotion from the front of the house. Jake was perched on a stool, wide-eyed and silent. "Gary, Mrs. Henderson." I burst in, my breath coming in short gasps. They all jumped. "I need your help. It's about Jake." Gary stepped forward, protective. "What's happened?" "Mrs. Harrington?" We heard the shouting. "It's Liam. He's collapsed. An ambulance is coming." I forced myself to sound shocked and worried, which wasn't hard. The fear was genuine, even if its source was different. I knelt in front of Jake, ignoring the dirt on my expensive black dress. "Jake, listen to me. Remember our secret?" He nodded, his lower lip trembling. "The men in uniforms, the police, they might come and ask you questions. They might ask what you saw today. Do you remember what I told you? Don't tell about the candies." He whispered. "Exactly. To anyone, not even the nice police officers. It's still our most important secret. Can you do that?" I was asking a child to lie to the police. The weight of it threatened to crush me, but the man fell down. Jake said, his voice small, Is he like Mr. Cartwright?" The question hung in the air. Gary and his wife exchanged a look of dawning horror. "We don't know, sweetie," I said, my voice breaking. "But you telling our secret won't help him. It might make things very, very confusing and scary. So we have to keep it safe. Okay, just for now. Okay," Jake whispered, burrowing into his mother's side. I stood up, facing the worried parents. "Please," I said, my voice low and desperate. "Take him home. Now. Through the back. Don't let anyone talk to him. Not tonight. If anyone asks. He was with you the whole time. He saw nothing. He heard nothing. He's just a little boy who got bored at a grown-up party." Mrs. Henderson looked at her husband, then at my face, which must have been a mask of pure terror. She nodded. A swift, decisive movement. "Come on, Jake, let's go see if we left the porch light on." She scooped him up and hurried toward the back door, Gary following with one last, searching look at me. One witness secured. For now. I turned and walked back toward the living room, forcing my pace to slow, making my breaths deep and ragged. By the time I re-entered, the scene was one of organized panic. Paramedics were crouched over Liam, who was on a gurney, an oxygen mask over his face. His eyes were closed. Aunt Martha stood near the fireplace, a sentinel, observing everything. Devin was by the bar, pouring himself a straight whiskey, his face unreadable. Eleanor, my stepmother, was sobbing dramatically on a settee, surrounded by a coterie of her friends. Her grief for my father had seemed performative. Her distress over Liam's collapse felt equally theatrical. A man in a rumpled trench coat stood near the patio doors, talking quietly to one of the uniformed officers. He had sharp, intelligent eyes that were taking in the room, the people, the half-empty glasses. Detective, as the paramedics wheeled Liam out. The detective stepped forward. "I'm Detective Marcus Thorne," he announced, his voice calm but carrying. "I need to ask everyone to remain here for a little while. We'll need to speak with each of you briefly." A murmur of protest went through the room. "This is an outrage." One of the board members spluttered. "We've just buried Ben." "I understand, sir," Thorne said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "A man has just suffered a serious medical episode in this room. We need to understand what happened, starting with the immediate family." His gaze swept over Eleanor, Devin, and finally landed on me. "Mrs. Harrington, you were the last one with your husband before he collapsed. Is that correct?" All eyes turned to me. I felt the weight of them, a mixture of pity, curiosity, and suspicion. I wrapped my arms around myself, shrinking in on myself, the grieving daughter, the distressed wife. It was my only armor. We were on the patio. I said, my voice trembling. He said he wasn't feeling well, that it was warm. He came inside for water. I followed him, and then he just fell. On the patio, Thorne repeated, jotting something in a small notebook. Was he eating or drinking anything out there? My heart stopped. The juice, did I? I don't think so. He had a whiskey earlier. Inside, he poured himself water from the pitcher on the table when we went out. And you? Were you drinking anything? Sparkling water. Liam brought it to me. I pointed to the glass I'd abandoned on a side table. Thorne's eyes followed my gesture, then drifted back to the patio doors and the table on the patio. There were other drinks. I think so. Iced tea, maybe some juice. I made myself look confused, overwhelmed. I wasn't really paying attention. My father, we just came from. Of course, Thorne said, not unkindly. He turned to one of the uniforms. Bag everything on that outdoor table. Every glass, every pitcher, and the contents of the indoor bar. My blood ran cold. They were taking the evidence. The pitcher I'd switched. Would they find traces? Would the chemical analysis show what was supposed to be in there? Devin stepped forward, his glass still in hand. Detective, this seems like a hell of a response for a possible heart attack or food poisoning. My brother-in-law works too hard. It's been a stressful day. Thorne looked at Devin with polite interest. And you are Devin Cartwright, Ben's son. He said it with a defiant edge. Mr. Cartwright. And where were you when Mr. Harrington collapsed? Watching him work the room. Like always, Devin said, a sneer in his voice. Then he shrugged. I was over by the fireplace. Saw him stagger in from outside, looking like death warmed over. Then he pointed at my sister and hit the deck. The room went silent again. He pointed at my sister. Devin had just thrown a lit match into the room. Thorne's gaze swung back to me. Sharper now. He pointed at you. Mrs. Harrington? I felt the world tilt. I don't know. It was all so fast. He was stumbling. He might have been reaching out. I let my voice break, letting tears well up. He looked so scared. I think he was just trying to get to me. Aunt Martha moved then, inserting herself smoothly between me and the detective. Detective Thorne, My niece has buried her father today. She has just watched her husband be taken away in an ambulance. This line of questioning can surely wait until she's had a moment to compose herself. She is clearly in shock. Thorne studied Martha for a moment, then gave a curt nod. Very well, Mrs. Harrington. We'll need a formal statement tomorrow. Please don't leave town. He turned his attention to the other guests, starting to take names and preliminary accounts. Martha guided me away, back toward the private study. Once inside, she closed the door firmly. Devin, I hissed, the panic finally breaking through. Why would he say that? Why would he tell them Liam pointed at me? Martha's face was grim, because Devin is many things. But he's not stupid. He saw you at that table. He suspects something is very, very wrong. By drawing the detective's attention to you, he's either trying to punish you for something, or what? Or he's trying to force the issue, to get the police looking in the right direction. Even if he doesn't know the full story, it's a dangerous, clumsy move. She walked to the window, peering out at the flashing lights of the police cars. They took the pictures. Abigail, the one you switched. I know. I sank into my father's leather desk chair. The smell of him, cigar smoke, and old paper, almost undoing me. What if they find something in it? What if they think They won't find what they're looking for in that picture. Martha said, turning to face me, because you poured out. They'll find clean orange juice. The question is, will they find residue in the other pitcher? The one he actually drank from at the bar, or in his whiskey glass. But he didn't drink the poison juice. I said, the logic spiraling. He drank water from the clean pitcher. So if they find poison, where did it come from? A new, more terrifying thought emerged. Unless he had a different source, something he took earlier, or someone else gave it to him. We stared at each other. The conspiracy was growing tendrils, reaching into the dark. We need to know what that poison was, Martha stated, and we need to know what the autopsy on your father shows, if they even order one now. After this, a knock on the study door made us both jump. It was Devin. He didn't wait for an answer, he just walked in, closing the door behind him. The three of us stood in a tense triangle in the middle of the room. All right, Abi, Devin said, his voice low and hard. Enough. What did you do to him? I didn't do anything. I shot back, the anger a welcome relief from the fear. Bullshit. I saw you. At the drink table. You looked like you were disposing of a body. And now Liam's on his way to the hospital with God knows what wrong with him. And he pointed right at you. So talk. Why do you care? Devin? I fired back. You've hated him since the day you met him. I care because this looks bad. For you. And for this family. He ran a hand through his hair. Look, I know he's a snake. I've always known it. Dad knew it too. At the end, I think. Did you finally figure it out? His words hit me like a physical blow. What do you mean? Dad knew it. Devin's expression shifted, the anger melting into something more complex, grief and frustration. The last time I saw him, he was agitated. He said he was worried about you, that he'd made a mistake with Liam, giving him so much control. He said he was changing the will to protect you. He said, Devin, if something happens to me, you look after your sister. You watch him. The room spun. My father's last words to me. Things aren't always what they seem, he'd been trying to warn me. And he'd enlisted Devin, of all people, as my protector. Something did happen to him. I whispered, the tears finally falling, hot and real. And I think Liam did it. And today he tried to do it to me. I told him. Everything. Jake's story. The powder. The switch. Liam's escalating symptoms and the horrifying comprehension in his eyes. Devin listened, his face growing paler and harder with each word. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. You should have come to me, he finally said, his voice rough. I didn't know if I could trust you. I admitted. A bitter smile touched his lips. Fair enough. He looked at Martha. What's the play? Martha, who had been observing the sibling exchange closely, nodded as if Devin had passed a test. First, we let the police do their work, but we guide them subtly. Abigail will give her statement tomorrow, a shaken, confused woman who has no idea why her husband pointed at her. Second, we find out what the hospital says about Liam's condition. Third, and most importantly, we start our own investigation. We need access to Liam's things. His computer, his phone, his financials. I can get into his study at home. I said, I know where he hides his important files. Good. Martha said, Devin, you still have contacts at the company. I need you to dig. Look for anything unusual in the books lately. Any side deals. Any pressure Liam might have been putting on people since Ben's death. Devin nodded, a grim determination settling over him. For the first time in years, we were on the same side. Another knock. Detective Thorne's voice came through the door. Mrs. Harrington, we're finishing up. You're free to go to the hospital or home, but I'll need to see you at the station tomorrow at 10. The outside world was pressing in. The game was no longer just between me, Liam, and a frightened little boy. It now included the police, my brother, and a web of motives we were only beginning to untangle. I had swapped the poison drink, but I had a sickening feeling I'd only bought myself a temporary and very precarious reprieve. The silence in the ICU waiting room was a physical presence, thick and heavy, broken only by the soft, rhythmic beep of monitors from the adjacent ward and the occasional hushed conversation of medical staff. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile, shadowless glow. It was past midnight. Aunt Martha had gone home to manage the fallout and field calls from concerned and nosy acquaintances. Devin was at this state, ostensibly holding down the fort. But really, I knew, beginning the discreet digging we'd discussed. I was alone, sitting on an unforgiving vinyl chair, staring at the closed door to Liam's room. A doctor in blue scrubs finally emerged. Looking tired, I stood up, my leg stiff. Mrs. Harrington? Yes. How is he? Stable. We've pumped his stomach, administered activated charcoal, and a specific antidote. He's lucky, whatever it was. He didn't ingest a massive dose. He's conscious, but weak and disoriented. You can see him for a few minutes. Keep it calm. Antidote? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. You know what it was? The doctor's expression became carefully neutral. We have a strong suspicion based on the symptom progression: tachycardia, diaphoresis, respiratory distress, followed by CNS depression. It's consistent with a class of drugs sometimes used for, well, let's just say it's not something typically found in spoiled shrimp. The toxicology panel will confirm. The police have been notified. He gave me a sympathetic but probing look. Do you have any idea how he might have come into contact with such a substance? I shook my head, the picture of bewildered distress. No, none. It must have been an accident. Maybe something at the funeral home? Or in his drink. I was walking a razor's edge, suggesting a direction while feigning ignorance. Perhaps. The doctor said non-committally, he's in room 4. Just a few minutes. I pushed the door open. The room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the equipment. Liam lay in the raised bed, and 4-line snaking from his hand. He looked pale and shrunken, his eyes closed. The powerful, capable man from this afternoon was gone, replaced by this vulnerable figure. For a fleeting second, a wave of pity washed over me. Then I remembered Jake's voice. Plink, plink. His eyes fluttered open. They were cloudy with drugs and exhaustion, but they focused on me as I approached the bedside. He tried to speak, his voice a dry croak. He gestured weakly to the plastic cup of water on the tray. I picked it up, held the straw to his lips. He took a few sips, his eyes never leaving my face. Abi, he rasped, sinking back onto the pillow. What happened? You collapsed. Liam, at the reception. They brought you here. My voice was flat, devoid of its usual warmth. I feel terrible, like I've been run over. He closed his eyes again, then opened them, a flicker of confusion there. The doctor said, "Poison? That's insane. Is it?" I asked softly. I pulled the visitor's chair close to the bed and sat down, my posture rigid. The time for the grieving wife act was over. Here, in this sterile room, with only the beeping monitor as a witness. It was just us. He stared at me, the confusion in his eyes slowly clearing, replaced by a dawning wariness. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I've been thinking," I said, keeping my voice low and steady. "About Daddy's sudden heart attack, about his stomach problems, about how you were always so helpful, making his tea, his nightcap, so attentive, his brow furrowed. I was trying to take care of him. We all were. Were you?" I leaned forward slightly. "A little boy saw you, Liam, today, at the funeral home. He saw you put something in my orange juice, a white powder from a packet." He described it perfectly. All color drained from Liam's already pale face. The monitor beside him let out a quick, sharp series of beeps as his heart rate spiked. He struggled to push himself up on his elbows. "A boy? What boy? That's a lie. He's confused. He's making up stories. He's not confused." He was very specific. I held his gaze, my own unwavering. He said, "You looked around to make sure no one was watching, just like you must have done with Daddy." The denial in his eyes was fracturing, replaced by a panicked calculation. "Abigail, listen to me. You're not well. The stress, the grief, it's making you imagine things. You need help." The only help I needed was not drinking the juice you were so desperate for me to have. I said, my tone icy, and I didn't. I poured it out. I switched the pitcher. "The poison that was meant for me, you drank it, Liam. Or at least, you drank the water from the pitcher you thought was the poison one. That's the funny part, isn't it? You poisoned yourself." The truth of it slammed into him. I saw the moment of horrific understanding, the same look he'd given me in the living room, but now stripped of its immediacy, replaced by a cold, sickening clarity. His plan had not only failed, it had backfired catastrophically. He had become the victim of his own plot. His weakness seemed to evaporate, burned away by a surge of furious adrenaline. He pushed himself fully upright, wincing but ignoring the pain, his eyes blazing with a venom I had never seen before. "You clever bitch," he hissed, the pretense gone entirely. The mask was off. This was the real Liam. "You stupid, clever little bitch. Do you have any idea what you've done? I've survived." I shot back, my own fear giving way to a hard, cold anger, which is more than you intended for me, or for my father. He let out a short, sharp laugh that turned into a cough. "Your father was a sentimental old fool. He was going to tie up the company, cut me out, give more control to that waste of space brother of yours. All because he got a sudden attack of family values in his dotage. He was going to undo years of my work. My work. I built that company alongside him. I deserved it." There it was. The motive, laid bare, greed and wounded entitlement. "So you killed him." I eased him out. Liam corrected, his voice a low snarl. It was painless, a gradual build-up. It looked perfectly natural, a tragic heart attack. No one would have ever questioned it. And then you would have been too distraught to manage anything. I would have taken care of you, of the company, of everything. We would have been set. But you had to be difficult. You had to start asking questions, looking at papers you shouldn't. I saw you in my study last week. I knew I had to act faster. The casual confession, the utter lack of remorse, stole the breath from my lungs. "You're a monster. I'm a pragmatist." He spat. "And you've just made a fatal error. You think telling this fairy tale to the police will work? You have a child's word against mine, a child who will recant, or disappear, or be proven unreliable. I have my brother. He'll back up every move I've made. We have records, emails, witnesses who will say your father was paranoid, that you've been unstable with grief. His brother. So they're Wasawi. The conspiracy had a shape. You're the one in a hospital bed, poisoned by your own hand. I reminded him, though a chill was spreading through me. A mysterious accident, a tragic attempt on the grieving son-in-law that failed. His smile was ghastly. And who had the best opportunity? Who was seen acting strangely by her own brother? Who stands to inherit everything if her husband is out of the picture? You, Abigail. It's your word against the world's. And I have the resources, the reputation, and the allies to make sure the world believes me. He leaned forward as far as the four-tubing would allow, his voice dropping to a venomous whisper. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to go home. You're going to be the devoted, worried wife. You're going to tell the police it was all a terrible misunderstanding, a tragic accident with some tainted mixers. And you will never speak of that boy again. If you so much as whisper a word of this insanity to anyone else, I will destroy you. I will make sure you spend the rest of your life in a psychiatric ward. And everyone you care about, Martha, that brat brother of yours, that groundskeeper's kid, they will all suffer. I will bury you so deep you'll never see daylight again. Do you understand me? The threat hung in the antiseptic air, more potent than any poison. He wasn't just threatening me. He was threatening my whole world. The man I'd married was gone, and in his place was this ruthless, calculating stranger who would stop at nothing. I stood up slowly, my legs trembling not with fear now, but with a cold, crystallizing resolve. I looked down at him, this diminished king in his sterile bed. I understand you perfectly, Liam, I said, my voice quiet but clear. I understand that you murdered my father. I understand that you tried to murder me. And I understand that you think you've won because you have money and lies on your side. I took a step back toward the door, but you made one mistake. Oh, and what's that? He sneered. You underestimated me. You thought I was just Daddy's little girl. Too soft, too trusting, too broken to fight back. I reached for the door handle. I'm not just Abigail Harrington anymore. I'm Benjamin Cartwright's daughter, and you just declared war on the wrong family. I didn't wait for his response. I walked out of the room, closing the door softly on his stunned, furious face. The confrontation was over. The marriage was dead. And now, the real battle began. I walked down the bright, silent hallway, the echo of his threats still ringing in my ears. But they were now drowned out by a new, more powerful sound, the deafening roar of my own fury, and the absolute, unshakable determination to see him pay for what he'd done. The drive back to the Cartwright estate was a blur of dark roads and racing thoughts. Liam's threats echoed in my skull, a toxic refrain. Psychiatric, ward, suffer, bury you, but beneath the fear, a cold, clear fury was solidifying. He had confessed, not in a way I could prove to the police, but he had looked me in the eye and admitted to murdering my father. That knowledge was a weapon, and I intended to use it. The house was dark and silent, a mausoleum. Eleanor was likely sedated in her wing. The staff had been given the night off. I stood in the grand foyer, the echoes of the day's mourners still haunting the air, and felt a profound sense of alienation. This was my childhood home, but it felt like enemy territory. A floorboard creaked upstairs. I froze. Abigail, is that you? Aunt Martha's voice, low and cautious, came from the top of the staircase. She descended, still dressed in her funeral clothes, her face etched with exhaustion and concern. I couldn't leave you alone here. Not after everything. How is he? Alive, I said, the word tasting bitter, and talking. I followed her into the study, my father's sanctuary. The scent of his cigars and leather was stronger here, a comforting ghost that now felt like an accusation. I should have seen it. I should have known. I collapsed into his worn armchair, while Martha, poured 2 generous fingers of his good scotch. "Talk," she commanded, handing me a glass. The words tumbled out in a hushed, furious torrent. The hospital room, Liam's weakening denial, his furious confession, his blatant threats. Martha listened without interruption, her face growing grimmer with each detail. "His brother," she said when I finished, swirling the amber liquid in her glass. "Evan. He's always been the quiet one, the one in the shadows. Liam was the charming face. Evan handled the messier aspects of the business. If Liam is involved, Evan is his right hand. He threatened Jake. He threatened you, Devin. Everyone," I said, the fear spiking again. "He has resources. Martha, he's been planning this. He has records," I said. "Emails, witnesses, which means we need better records," Martha stated, her eyes scanning the room, landing on my father's massive, antique desk. "We need proof. He's right about one thing. A child's testimony is fragile. We need something concrete, something that places him at the scene of your father's medication, or a financial motive so glaring the police can't ignore it." The will. Liam had been so focused on the will. I put my glass down with a decisive click. Dad's lawyer, Franklin Reed. He handled the new will. Franklin is old school. Client confidentiality is his religion. He won't tell you a thing unless you're the executor or a direct beneficiary named in the document. Martha said, "Then it's a good thing I am both." A new voice said from the doorway. Devin stood there, leaning against the frame. He held up a sleek, silver key. "Dad gave me this a month ago for his safety deposit box. Told me the combination was Mom's birthday. Said if anything ever happened to him, I was to go there with Franklin before the formal reading. A preview, he called it. His mouth twisted. I think he knew. Abby. I think he had a feeling. Hope, sharp and painful, lanced through me. Did you go? What's in it? I haven't gone yet, Devin said, walking into the room. Franklin's out of town until tomorrow afternoon. The formal reading is at his office at 5. But Dad's instructions were clear. Me and Franklin. Alone. First. He looked at me, his expression uncharacteristically serious. He was protecting you, even from me, until the last minute. He must have known Liam had his hooks into the company lawyers. Franklin was the only one he trusted completely. We need to see that will, I said, standing up. But we also need to look here. Now, Liam's study, his home office, before he's discharged or send someone. Martha nodded. Devin, you and I will start in the study. Abigail, you know the house better. Check his personal spaces, bedroom, dressing room, any place he might hide something. We moved with a silent, grim efficiency. The house felt like a ship we were searching for leaks as it sank. I headed upstairs to the master suite, a room that now felt like a stranger's. I started with the obvious, his nightstand, his dresser, nothing but cufflinks, receipts, the normal detritus. Then I remembered, the false back of his closet. He'd shown it to me once, joking it was where he hid my birthday presents. A small, wooden panel that slid aside, my heart hammering. I pushed aside his row of perfectly tailored suits and found the seam. I pressed the hidden catch, and the panel clicked open. Inside was not a gift, but a small, fireproof lockbox. It was locked. Frustration welled up. I was about to go search for a key when my eyes fell on the ugly, modern art sculpture on his dresser, a gift from a Japanese business associate he secretly despised. He'd always said it was the perfect hiding place because no one would ever want to look at it twice. I picked it up. It was heavy, hollow. I twisted the base. It unscrewed. Inside, wrapped in a soft cloth, was a single, small key. My hands trembled as I fit it into the lockbox. It turned smoothly. Inside, there were no stacks of cash or flash drives. There was a slim, sealed manila envelope and a single, small plastic baggie with a residue of white powder tucked into a side pocket. My breath caught. Little white candies, .it, was a grainy powder. I didn't touch it. Next to it was a burner phone, cheap and prepaid. I picked up the envelope. It wasn't sealed shut, just tucked in. I pulled out the contents. Bank statements from an offshore institution in the Cayman Islands. The account was in the name of a holding company I didn't recognize, Valkyrie Ventures. The transactions made my blood run cold. Large, regular deposits over the past 18 months, sourced from what looked like shell companies. And then, in the last 2 months, a series of massive withdrawals. The final balance was still substantial, but it had been nearly halved. The last sheet was a single printed email, dated 3 weeks before my father's death. It was from Liam's personal, encrypted email to another address, ivan@valkyrieventures.k. The subject line was, "Timeline acceleration." The body was brief and chilling. The old man is getting suspicious, asking too many questions about the Singapore discrepancies. He's talking to Reed about restructuring the trust. We can't wait for the gradual approach anymore. Need to initiate phase 2. Asset transfer to the secondary account is complete. Proceed with the contingency for A, clean and natural. Use the standard supply. Confirm receipt. That was me. The contingency for A. The standard supply. The powder in the baggie. I sat back on my heels, the papers rustling in my shaking hands. It was all here. The motive, money. The company. The method, the standard supply of poison. The conspiracy, Evan. The cold, clinical planning of my father's murder and my own. It was a roadmap to hell, written in bank codes and corporate jargon. I grabbed the burner phone. It was powered off. I turned it on. The call log was empty. The contacts held one number, labeled simply E. I pocketed the phone, the envelope, and carefully, using a tissue, picked up the baggie of powder. This was evidence. This was my life insurance. I found Martha and Devin in the study. They had my father's old filing cabinets open, spreadsheets and contracts littering the desk. Find anything? Devin asked, looking up. I didn't speak. I just laid the contents of the lockbox on the desk, next to my father's papers. Martha picked up the email first. Her lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line as she read it. She passed it silently to Devin. Devin's face darkened with a rage, so profound it was almost quiet. He read the email, then glanced at the bank statements. Valkyrie Ventures. He muttered, "I've seen that name. On peripheral invoices. Freelance security and logistics consulting." He was siphoning money. For years, he looked at the baggie, and that's the standard supply. "It's enough, isn't it?" I asked, my voice small. "For the police?" "It's a start," Martha said, her mind already working. "But it's not a slam dunk. A good lawyer could argue the email is vague. The powder isn't proven. The bank account is for a legitimate side business. He'll say you planted it. We need more. We need to connect that powder to your father's body. We need the source. And we need to find out who he is," I said, holding up the burner phone. "But we know. It's Evan." Devin stood up, pacing. "Tomorrow, the will reading. If Dad did what I think he did, it changes everything. It gives you the power, Abi, control of the company, the voting shares. It cuts Liam off at the knees financially. A man like him, when backed into a corner with his money gone, he trailed off. The implication clear. He would become even more dangerous. We can't wait for tomorrow," I said, a new idea forming. Desperate and reckless. Liam thinks he's cowed me. He thinks I'm home. Scared. Following his orders. He doesn't know we have this. I pointed to the evidence. We have to move before he does. "What are you suggesting?" Martha asked, her eyes narrowing. "I'm suggesting we pay a visit to Valkyrie Ventures' other half," I said, my fear now fully transformed into a hard, sharp resolve. "Tonight, before Liam can call his brother from the hospital and warn him that his plan is falling apart. Devin stopped pacing. A slow, grim smile spread across his face. It was the first time I'd seen my brother look like a true ally. Evan's townhouse, in the city. I know where he lives. Martha looked between us. It's risky. If he's there, then we get answers, I said, gathering the papers and the baggie into my father's old leather briefcase. And if he's not, we find them. Liam threatened to bury us. It's time we started digging his grave first. The plan was simple, born of adrenaline and desperation. Devin would drive. We'd use his car, not mine, which Liam might have someone watching. We'd go to Evan Harrington's townhouse in the upscale Georgetown district of D.C. We didn't know what we'd do when we got there. Confront him. Search the place. Maybe just stake it out. But we had to move. The evidence in my father's briefcase felt both powerful and perilously fragile. We were in the foyer, pulling on coats, when the sharp, insistent chime of the doorbell echoed through the silent house. It was 1:15 a.m. We froze, a tableau of guilt and suspicion. Aunt Martha, who had insisted on coming as a voice of reason, put a restraining hand on my arm. Devin's eyes met mine, wide with alarm. "Who the hell?" he muttered, stepping toward the front window and peering through the sheer curtain. He stiffened. "It's him, Evan. And he's not alone. Two guys, big ones. Looks like they brought luggage." My blood turned to ice. Liam had moved faster than we'd anticipated. He'd called his brother from the hospital, and Evan had come to take control, just as we'd feared, but far sooner than we'd hoped. The bell rang again, longer this time. A fist followed, pounding on the heavy oak door, not a polite knock, but a demand for entry. "We can't ignore it," Martha whispered, her face pale but composed. "He knows we're here. The lights are on." She looked at the briefcase in my hand. "Hide that. Now." I darted back into the study and shoved the briefcase under the massive desk, behind the knee-hole drape. It was the best I could do. I took a deep, steadying breath, channeling the persona of the shell-shocked widow. As I returned to the foyer, Martha was already opening the door. Evan Harrington stood on the threshold. He was Liam's older brother by 2 years, but where Liam was all polished charm and calculated warmth, Evan was carved from granite. He was taller, broader, with a close-cropped military haircut and cold, assessing eyes that missed nothing. He wore a dark, expensive overcoat, unbuttoned. Behind him loomed 2 large men in nondescript black jackets, private security, not police. They each held a sleek, hard-shell suitcase. "Martha," Evan said, his voice a low baritone that held no warmth. "I apologize for the hour. Under the circumstances, I felt it necessary to come immediately." His gaze swept past her, landing on me and Devin. "Abigail, Devin. I came as soon as I heard about Liam. Drove straight from the airport. Terrible business." He didn't wait for an invitation. He stepped inside, his men following, closing the door behind them. He shrugged off his coat, handing it to one of the men as if he were a valet. He was treating the house as his own. "What are you doing here, Evan?" Devin asked, his voice tight. He positioned himself slightly in front of me. "My brother is in the ICU, Devin," Evan said, his tone implying Devin was an idiot for asking. "His wife is clearly distressed." His eyes flicked over me. "And there's a major company to run, a will to be read, and a police investigation swirling around a poisoning at a family funeral. The situation requires stability." Liam asked me to step in. The lie was delivered with such absolute, unshakable conviction it was breathtaking. Liam asked me, from a hospital bed after having his stomach pumped. "Sure, Liam is in no condition to ask for anything," I said, finding my voice. It sounded thin and shaky. "Good. Let him think I was broken. The doctor said he's heavily sedated. He was lucid enough to call me before they sedated him. Evan countered smoothly. He's worried about you, Abigail, worried about the stress you're under. He's concerned that in your grief, you might misinterpret things, make rash decisions. His eyes held mine, a silent warning that mirrored Liam's threats perfectly. My job is to help, to handle the practicalities, so you can focus on healing. What practicalities? Aunt Martha asked, her voice cool. Securing the house. For one, Evan said, glancing at his men. With all this police activity and media attention, security is a concern. Marcus and Roy here will ensure there are no intrusions. They'll be staying in the guest wing. He was installing his own guards. In my house. To protect us. Or to imprison and watch us. That's not necessary, I began. I'm afraid it is. Evan interrupted, his voice leaving no room for debate. Also, the company, as COO and Liam's designated successor in the event of his incapacity, I'll be assuming day-to-day control of Cartwright Logistics until he recovers. I'll need access to Ben's study, his files, the corporate servers. My grip tightened on the doorframe I was leaning against. This was the takeover, happening in real time, dressed up as benevolent assistants. The will hasn't been read yet. Evan, we don't know what my father's wishes were. A faint, humorless smile touched Evan's lips. The will is a formality. Abigail, I've seen the previous versions. The corporate structure is clear. Liam holds the proxy for the majority of the voting shares through the marital trust. In his absence, that duty falls to me. It's in the bylaws. You're welcome to have your lawyer review them tomorrow. He turned to one of his men. Roy, take the bags upstairs, the blue room and the one adjoining it. Marcus, do a perimeter check. The men moved with quiet efficiency, one heading up the stairs, the other walking toward the back of the house. They were taking over. Devin took a step forward, getting into Evan's space. You can't just barge in here and start giving orders. Evan, this isn't your company. This isn't your house. Evan didn't flinch. He looked down at Devin with pure disdain. This isn't a playground. Devin, this is a multi-million-dollar corporation and a crime scene. Your track record of responsible decision-making is, well, let's call it checkered. I'm here to prevent you from making another mess for someone else to clean up. He shifted his gaze back to me. Now, Abigail, the study. I'll need the keys and any passwords to Ben's computer and the secure filing cabinets. He held out his hand. It was a command. My mind raced. The briefcase with the evidence was under the desk in that very study. If he went in there now, with his goons, he might find it. I had to stall. I had to redirect. I don't have them. I stammered, letting tears well in my eyes. Daddy never gave them to me. Liam handled all of that. And with everything tonight, my head is pounding. I can't think. Can't this wait until morning? Until the lawyer is here? I was pouring on the helplessness, playing the exact role they both, Liam and Evan, expected of me. The frail, overwhelmed heiress. Evan studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. He slowly lowered his hand. Of course, the shock. I understand, but his eyes said he didn't believe a word of it. He saw it as a delaying tactic, which it was, but he seemed confident he could overcome it. We'll reconvene at 9 a.m. I'll have Franklin rejoin us here. We can sort out the legalities in the morning. You should get some rest. It was a dismissal. He was sending me to my room. Come on, Abby, Devin said, taking my elbow, his own anger barely contained. Let's go upstairs. Aunt Martha gave Evan a final, piercing look. We will be speaking with Franklin privately first. Evan, as per Ben's instructions, good night. We retreated up the stairs, feeling Evan's cold gaze on our backs every step of the way. The sound of his man, Marcus, checking locks on the patio doors downstairs felt like the snap of locks on a cage. Once in the upstairs hallway, out of earshot, Devin hissed, "He's locking us down. Those men aren't security. They're jailers. We need to get the briefcase out of the study before morning." I whispered urgently, before Evan tears that room apart. The one with the goon downstairs is probably doing his perimeter check in the study right now, Devin said, peering over the banister. Martha's face was set in lines of deep thought. We can't risk it now. They're on high alert. We need to wait. Let them think they've won the first round. Let Evan believe you're cowed and helpless. He'll get complacent. And what about tomorrow at 9? I asked, panic rising. When he demands the keys and starts going through everything, he'll find it. Then we make sure that before 9 a.m. That briefcase is no longer in the study. A new, quiet voice said. We all whirled around. Standing in the shadowed doorway of a spare bedroom was Gary Henderson, the groundskeeper. He was still dressed in his work clothes. He must have come in through the secondary stairs from the kitchen wing. Gary, I gasped. What are you? I saw the car arrive. The men didn't look right, he said, his voice a low rumble. Been listening from the service stairs. My wife has Jake safe at her sister's. Told me to keep an eye on you. Mrs. Harrington said you were in real trouble. He looked at each of us. Where's the case? I know this house better than any city boy security. I can get it. Hope, fragile and desperate, flickered to life. I quickly described where it was hidden under the desk. Gary nodded. The study has the old butler's pantry entrance. Hidden door behind the bookshelf. Your dad showed me once. For emergencies. I can get in that way. Long as that fellow isn't sitting at the desk itself. You all make a noise. Draw him out. A loud argument upstairs. Maybe. Devin nodded. A plan forming. We can do that. Martha, you and Abby start arguing about medication or something. Loudly. I'll go down and complain to Evan about the intrusion. It should pull the guard into the foyer or the hallway. 5 minutes later, the quiet house was shattered by raised voices. I don't want a sedative. Aunt Martha, I just want my father back. I wailed from the top of the stairs, throwing in a sob for good measure. Abigail, you need to sleep. You're hysterical. Martha's voice replied, sharp and carrying. Downstairs, we heard a door open, likely the study. Footsteps heading toward the foyer. Devin's voice joined the cacophony, shouting from the first floor landing. Evan, can you control your people? We're trying to have a private family moment up here. This is unacceptable. The muffled sounds of a confrontation below drifted up. My heart was in my throat. Was Gary in? Was he out? After 2 agonizing minutes, the argument died down. Fine, whatever. Just keep them quiet, Devin shouted, a perfect impression of exasperated defeat. He trudged back up the stairs, giving me a tight, wide-eyed look. We waited in the darkened upper hallway, not daring to speak. After what felt like an eternity, a figure detached itself from the deeper shadows near the service door. It was Gary. He held my father's leather briefcase. Got it, he whispered, handing it to me. The one guard was at the desk, on his phone. Never looked up. It's safe. I could have hugged him. Thank you, Gary. Thank you. What now? Devin whispered. We have it, but we're still trapped in here with them. Martha's eyes gleamed in the dark. Now, we wait for our appointment with Franklin Reed, and we pray that what's in Ben's safety deposit box is the key to turning this whole house of cards against the men who built it. She looked at the briefcase in my hands. Guard that with your life. Abigail, it's not just evidence. It's our only leverage. Downstairs, we could hear Evan's calm, low voice giving instructions. He thought he had secured the perimeter. He thought he had us contained. He had no idea that in the dark, we had just stolen the foundation out from under his feet. The night was far from over. The briefcase felt like a live bomb in my hands. Gary had slipped back into the shadows of the service quarters, a ghost in our own home. Devin, Martha, and I retreated to my old childhood bedroom, the one place that felt furthest from Liam's influence. Though even here, the tension seeped through the walls. We could hear the low murmur of voices from downstairs, the occasional heavy footstep of one of Evan's men. The house was no longer a sanctuary. It was a softly occupied territory. I placed the briefcase on the bed and clicked it open. The contents seemed less like abstract evidence now and more like a ticking clock. The email, the powder, the bank statements, they were our only weapons against a man who had just effectively placed us under house arrest. We can't just sit on this, Devin said, pacing the length of the room. Evan isn't here to make tea. He's here to sanitize the scene. By 9 a.m., he'll have a story locked down, alibis prepared, and that study scrubbed clean of anything that doesn't fit his narrative. We have to get this to the police. Tonight. And say what? Martha countered, sitting gracefully on the edge of an armchair. She looked exhausted but razor sharp. That we broke into Liam's private safe? That we suspect him based on a child's testimony and an ambiguous email? Evan will have a battalion of lawyers there before the ink is dry on our statement, claiming we're grief-stricken and trying to frame his poor, hospitalized brother. He'll produce witnesses to say your father was paranoid. Abigail, he'll have medical experts ready to testify that Ben's symptoms were perfectly consistent with a cardiac event. And that powder, she nodded toward the baggie, without a provable link to Ben's body or a confirmed source. It's just a mysterious substance. They'll say you planted it. Her cold, logical deconstruction of our position was a bucket of ice water. So what do? Wait for him to bury us? We do what your father would have done, Martha said, her voice firm. We outmaneuver him. We don't play the emotional, desperate card. We play the corporate, strategic one. We gather irrefutable evidence, and we find the right lever to use it. She leaned forward. We need 3 things. First, we need to know exactly what that substance is, and we need a sample from a verified, unimpeachable source, preferably one that can be linked directly to Evan or Liam. How? I asked, feeling hopeless. A private lab, not a police lab, someone discreet, who understands chain of custody and testifies in high-stakes civil and criminal cases. I know a firm in Baltimore. They're expensive and they ask no questions. We need to get them a sample of this. She pointed to the baggie. And, if possible, a sample from your father's body. I recoiled. Exhume him? Martha. It may not come to that, she said, though her eyes said it might. The coroner's initial finding was heart attack. But if we present compelling evidence of foul play, we can petition for a full toxicology reanalysis. That's for later. The first step is getting this analyzed. She gestured to the briefcase. Second, we need the will. Ben was trying to protect you. Abigail, that safety deposit box tomorrow is the key. If he disinherited Liam or placed controlling shares in a trust you control, it changes everything. It removes Liam's and, by extension, Evan's corporate authority. It gives you the power to fire them, to freeze assets, to launch an internal audit that would make their financial siphoning public. Money and control are their oxygen. We cut it off. And third, Devin asked, stopped in his tracks by her methodical planning. Third, we need an ally on the inside, not the local police. They're good men, but they're overworked, and this is a tangled, white-collar web with a side of potential homicide. We need someone who can see the bigger picture and isn't afraid of a powerful name. A detective? Like Thorne? I asked. Thorne is a question mark. He's sharp. He saw Liam point at you. He took the pictures. He's suspicious, but he's by the book. We need to give him a book worth following. She paused, thinking. I have a name. An old friend's son. Michael Sable. He's not a cop anymore. He's a private investigator. Former FBI Financial Crimes Unit. He understands money trails, corporate structures, and he knows how to find the hidden pressure points. More importantly, he's discreet and he owes me a favor. Hope, thin but real, began to thread its way through the dread. You think he'd help? If I ask, and if we can pay his retainer, yes, he'd see the challenge in it. And he'd understand that taking down men like Liam and Evan is its own reward. She looked at Devin. You have access to funds? Not the main accounts. Evan will be watching those. Devin nodded slowly. I have a separate account. Dad set it up for me years ago. A keep you out of trouble fund. It's not huge, but it's 6 figures. Untraceable to the company. I can access it. Good. First thing tomorrow. You reach out to Sable. Set up a meeting. Somewhere public, but private. A club. A high-end hotel bar. Not here. She turned to me. Abigail, your job is Franklin Reed. You and Devin go to that bank. You get that will. You read it. You understand exactly what power your father left you. That is your shield and your sword. And what about Evan and his goons downstairs? I whispered, glancing at the door. We give them nothing. Martha said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. We play our roles. You, Abigail, are the fragile flower. You stay in your room. Overcome. Devin, you are the resentful, powerless son, making a nuisance of yourself, but ultimately harmless. I will be the doting, slightly clueless aunt, trying to keep the peace. We offer them coffee in the morning. We are polite. We give them no reason to escalate, to search us, to become physically confrontational. We make them believe their intimidation is working perfectly. And the briefcase? The powder? I asked, looking at the damning evidence, just sitting on my floral bedspread. Martha stood up. We don't keep it here. It's the one thing they might risk everything to find. Gary got it out once. He can get it out again. She went to the small intercom panel by the door, an antique system my father had never removed. She pressed a button connected to the groundskeeper's cottage. A moment later, Gary's staticky voice came through. Yes, ma'am? Gary, it's Martha. We have a package that needs to leave the premises immediately, without our new guest seeing. A pause. The old gardener's gate, behind the hydrangeas, overlooks the service road. I can get to my truck from the cottage garage, swing around, and be at that gate in 3 minutes. Can you get the package there? We can, I said, my heart pounding anew with the risk. Do it now, Martha said into the intercom. And Gary, take it to your sister's place. With Jake, don't tell your wife what's in it. Just that it's important to us. Guard it. Understood. The line went dead. We moved quickly. I repacked the briefcase, my fingers fumbling with the clasps. Devin cracked open the bedroom door, peering down the hall. Clear. We slipped out like thieves. Instead of going toward the main stairs, we went to the end of the hall, to a small, tucked-away door that led to a narrow back staircase, used by servants a century ago. It descended directly to the mudroom by the kitchen, and from there, a side door led to the walled garden. The cold night air hit us like a slap. We crouched low, moving through the skeletal winter shrubs toward the far wall, where a heavy, iron-bound wooden gate was shrouded by massive, dormant hydrangea bushes. My black dress was a poor camouflage against the pale stone paths. Every rustle of leaves sounded like a gunshot. We reached the gate. I could hear the faint rumble of an engine on the other side of the wall. A soft tap came from the other side. Devin unlatched the gate, swinging it open just enough. Gary's weathered face appeared in the crack. Without a word, I shoved the briefcase through. His hand closed around the handle. I'll keep it safe, he whispered, his eyes earnest in the gloom. You be careful in there. You too, Gary. Thank you. The gate closed with a soft thud, the latch clicking back into place. The sound of his truck engine faded into the distance. We were back in the house, the evidence gone, feeling both lighter and more exposed. The mission had shifted. It was no longer about finding proof. It was about building an unassailable case while under the enemy's roof. Back in my room, the plan solidified. The roles were set. The pieces were in motion. As I lay in the dark, listening to the unfamiliar creaks that were now Evan's men, I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a general in a silent war. guided by the steely counsel of my aunt and the grudging alliance of my brother. Liam and Evan thought they had us cornered. They thought they were the hunters. But as the first gray light of dawn began to bleed around the edges of the curtains, I knew the truth. The hunt had just begun, and we were no longer the prey. We were laying the trap, and tomorrow, at the bank with Franklin Reed, we would find out if my father had left us the final piece we needed to spring it. The clock on the mantelpiece ticked towards 9 a.m. with the slow, heavy finality of a countdown. Downstairs, we could hear Evan moving with a quiet, confident authority. He'd commandeered the kitchen, the smell of fresh coffee a perverse symbol of his takeover. Aunt Martha and I waited in the formal living room. Devin was already en route to meet the private investigator, Michael Sable. Our roles were set. I was the hollowed-out widow, clutching a damp handkerchief. Martha was the composed family matriarch, her spine straight, her eyes watchful. The front door opened at 8:59. Franklin Reed, my father's lawyer, entered, followed closely by a grim-faced Detective Thorne. Reed was a man in his 70s, with old money propriety etched into his face. Thorne's gaze swept the room, lingering on me, missing nothing. Evan emerged from the study, a file in his hand, as if he'd just been conducting urgent business. Franklin, detective, thank you for coming. As you can imagine, it's a trying time. Indeed, Reed said, his voice dry. My condolences to the family. Now, Ben's instructions were quite specific. Before any formal reading, I am to accompany his son, Devin Cartwright, to a secured location to review a document. Where is Mr. Cartwright? Devin is indisposed. Evan said, smoothly, given the strain of recent events. As the acting head of the family and Liam's appointed representative, I can stand in. Reed's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. No, Mr. Harrington, you cannot. The instructions name Devin Cartwright specifically. If he is unavailable, we wait. He turned to me. Mrs. Harrington, do you know your brother's whereabouts? I shook my head weakly. He was upset. He said he needed air. I haven't seen him since early this morning. This was our script. Devin's absence was a calculated risk, drawing Evan's focus away from him. Evan's jaw tightened. This is absurd. There are pressing matters. The matter of your brother's poisoning is pressing. Mr. Harrington, Detective Thorne interjected, his voice neutral, which is why I'm here. The preliminary talks screen came back. Liam Harrington had significant levels of digoxin in his system, a heart medication, in a high enough dose. It mimics a heart attack. The room went still. Digoxin, the standard supply. My father's heart attack. Thorne continued, watching Evan closely. It's a very specific toxin, not something you find in tainted buffet food. It suggests premeditation. Evan recovered quickly, a mask of shocked concern. My God, so someone tried to murder Liam? After just killing Ben? This is an attack on this family. He turned to me, his eyes suddenly blazing with false protectiveness. Abigail, you're not safe. It's clear now. The police need to provide protection. We're looking into all angles, Thorne said, including the possibility that Mr. Harrington's poisoning was self-inflicted or meant for someone else. His eyes flicked to me again. The pitcher of orange juice he poured from tested clean, but a glass of water he drank from inside had trace residues. It's a confusing picture. It was time. The trap was set. Evan felt in control, with Devin absent and the police seemingly baffled. Perhaps, I said, my voice a little stronger than it had been all morning. The picture is less confusing if you follow the money. Evan froze. What did you say? I stood up, letting the frail wife act fall away like a discarded shawl. Detective Thorne, my father, Benjamin Cartwright, was being systematically robbed. Siphoned funds through shell companies like Valkyrie Ventures. I walked to my father's desk, opened a drawer, and took out copies of the bank statements I'd made before Gary took the originals. I handed them to Thorne. These are offshore account records. The final, large withdrawals coincide with the weeks before his death. When he was growing suspicious, Evan's face was a stone. Where did you get those? Those are private financial documents. Forgeries. Likely. Abigail, your grief is speaking. My grief is very clear, Evan, I said, meeting his cold stare. It tells me my husband and his brother killed my father for money and control of his company. And when I got too close, they tried to kill me too. This is slanderous insanity. Evan barked, taking a step towards me. Marcus, his guard, shifted in the doorway. Is it? Aunt Martha spoke for the first time, her voice icy. Then perhaps you can explain this. She held up her phone. A recording from yesterday, a conversation you might find illuminating. She pressed play. The audio was crystal clear, captured by the tiny device she'd planted in the study after Gary retrieved the briefcase. Evan's voice from the recording. The old man's will is the only loose end. Once we have the codicil, we can force the board vote. Liam's ill health will necessitate my permanent appointment. An unknown male voice, muffled, likely one of his men. And the wife? Evan. A tragic, lingering grief, an accidental overdose of her sedatives. It will be arranged after the probate is settled. The sister and the Wastrel brother will get their pittances and be shown the door. The blood drained from Evan's face. It was a damning fragment, edited from a longer conversation we'd captured, but its meaning was unmistakable. You treacherous old witch. Evan snarled. All pretense gone. You bugged my private conversation? That's illegal. So is conspiracy to commit murder. Thorne said, his hand moving subtly towards his hip. Mr. Harrington, you need to come with me. Evan didn't look at Thorne. He looked at me with pure, undiluted hatred. You think you've won? You have nothing. My lawyers will shred that recording. Liam will recover and deny everything. You're a hysterical woman who lost her father and is trying to blame her husband. That's the story. That will always be the story. He gestured sharply to Marcus. The large man moved to block the door to the foyer. Roy appeared from the hallway, flanking us. The air turned to ice. You're not taking me anywhere. Detective, Evan said, his voice low and dangerous. This is a private family matter, a misunderstanding. My men will escort you out. Abigail will retract her hysterical accusations after she gets the rest and medical care she clearly needs. He was going for it. The final, brutal play, discredit, intimidate, and physically control. I don't think so. A new voice said. Devin stepped into the room from the patio doors, which Gary had silently unlocked. Beside him was a man in his 50s with a calm, analytical gaze, Michael Sable, and behind them, two uniformed police officers, their hands on their sidearms. You see, Evan, Devin said, while you were playing King of the Castle, we were at the bank with Franklin. We saw the codicil to the will. Franklin Reed nodded, opening his briefcase. Benjamin Cartwright's final amendment, executed and notarized 2 weeks before his passing. It places all voting shares of Cartwright Logistics into a trust controlled solely by Abigail Cartwright Harrington, with Devin as successor trustee. It explicitly strips Liam Harrington and any proxy or assignee of his of all executive authority and direct financial benefit beyond a modest annuity. The reasons cited: grave concerns regarding fiduciary conduct and personal integrity. Evan looked like he'd been shot. The financial motive, the very foundation of his and Liam's plan, was publicly eviscerated in a few dry legal sentences. Sable spoke, his voice factual. Mr. Harrington, we've also just received a preliminary match from a private lab. The chemical signature of the digoxin residue in the baggie recovered from Liam's safe is identical to a proprietary blend tracked to a closed dermatology trial in Zurich. a trial where Valkyrie Ventures was listed as a logistics partner. The paper trail is being compiled as we speak. Thorne stepped forward. Evan Harrington, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and grand larceny. Turn around. Put your hands behind your back. For a moment, Evan stood rigid, his eyes darting between the blocked exit, his immobilized men, and the damning evidence that had just closed in from all sides. The empire of lies had crumbled in under 10 minutes. His shoulders slumped. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a venomous resignation. He turned and put his hands behind his back as Thorne clamped the cuffs on. He'll never forgive you for this. Abigail. Evan spat as he was led away, his voice trembling with fury. He'll hate you until his last breath. I watched him go, the man who had come to bury us. The silence he left behind was profound, clean, and finally, safe. He's right. You know, I said quietly to no one in particular. Then I straightened, looking at Devon, at Martha, at Franklin Reed. But he's going to have a very, very long time to work on that hatred in a prison cell. The war was over. We had won.